Hello, everyone. My name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that you all are having a great day. It's Friday, of course, which is a wonderful day of the week. It's finally the weekend, and I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, of course. And if not, I really hope that you or your family really do find that safety and security in the near future. We have a small announcement to make. Well, small maybe for in the wide scale of things, but pretty big for us, and that's the fact that you guys are awesome. Um, so right now we have finally surpassed that first 50 subscriber mark. We're actually sitting at 52 right now, raw. So I really appreciate it, guys. That is a really big thing for us. But listen, the only way that this works is a community, and you guys have built an awesome community so far. You guys are really active. You guys are really, you guys are constantly posting stuff in the Discord. You guys actually care about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be the news that gives back, and the only way we can do that is through you guys. You guys have been amazing. You guys have given us a lot of support. You've given the staff a lot of support. You guys have given the organizations, most importantly, a lot of support, and I cannot thank you guys enough. It really does mean a lot to us, and it means a lot to everyone. So once again, I can't thank you guys enough. It's a really big deal for us, and I really just I appreciate it. Thank you. But obviously, there is a lot of stuff going on in the world, as you can see by the absolute ton of dots on the map today. A lot more good stuff than normal, which I'm really excited to be going through. But the overall, it's not really good situations worldwide. You got economic crises, you have environmental issues, you have all sorts of stuff, and it's really causing a damper on everyone's lives. I mean, they're being killed. It's famine. There is right now we're worried about, of course, still the coronavirus and diseases going on, and there's a lot of really violent rhetoric going on. So luckily, though, being such an awesome community that you guys have built, we're able to be the news that gives back. So please check out in the description down below and check out all of the different fundraisers we have going on, and we're constantly looking for more. So please don't be shy. Whether or not it pans out doesn't matter. What matters is that we can find some more organizations to add to that list in the description. We're not taking any of those super chats. We hate those things. What we want to do is we want to put a fundraiser on every single one of these streams without failure every single day that we're streaming. So if you guys could help us join in that journey, much appreciated. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. Everything helps. You're literally saving starving children in Ethiopia right now. That is what we're going for. Not just for the war in Ukraine, though, of course, there are plenty of ways to support that down there too. But don't forget the other parts of the world. We're all in this together, and while Ukraine may be the main focus, there are millions of other people worldwide that also need your help. And if you can't give anything at all, trust me, I completely understand. I've been there. So please, at least give us a like and subscribe. The more people that we help reach, or that you guys can help us reach, the more people that come here and get to enjoy the news, the way that I and the staff do things here, and also the more people that can help, the more people that can join in on those fundraisers, the more people that can kind of spread the word. So tell your friends about us, give us a like, give us a subscribe, and it really helps us. It really does. And with that, we're actually going to go ahead and dive right into the news, starting with our special report in Ukraine. So as we jump down here, there's been a couple of different developments. A lot of this stuff is in the Donbass. I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of, my computer's being just a little bit slow today. I'm not quite sure what the issue is. I have a feeling it might be NordVPN, but that's for a different place and time. As we jump over here, we can see that Russian missiles decide to liberate a lake beach over here in Lubny, which is here in the Poltava Oblast. So these Russian missiles landed in a lake right next to the beach, and it just slammed into the shallow waters, caused a large explosion. Now, this isn't something too crazy. We've seen this kind of stuff before. In fact, we aired it yesterday. But let's go ahead and take a look at the CCTV footage. So what does this mean? Well, I highly doubt that they meant to fire a ballistic missile into a river, but what this likely means is this missile had a failure. Now, these kind of failures in these missile systems have happened before. Last time there was an extensive strike on Kyiv with Caliber cruise missiles. One of them actually failed in flight and landed inside of a separate village outside of Kyiv, and destroyed several homes. And the mayor, obviously the mayor talked about that, and we aired that here. But these missiles are actually, a lot of their flight paths go directly over nuclear power plants throughout throughout Ukraine. I believe there's 16 total. But if just one cruise missile or ballistic missile fails, its flight motor fails, its navigation suite fails, then it could send one directly into any of those 16 different nuclear power plants. And what ends up happening is now we have a nuclear catastrophe without a nuclear exchange. So that's currently the ongoing situation here regarding that. And we're going to go ahead and jump over here into the Donbass. Now, there isn't any significant changes within Severodonetsk. We have heard some things where there have been some outlying areas that have been encircled or have been captured. They're pushing towards others. Now, we can't confirm any of this independently. Therefore, we're not going to go ahead and jump in on this map, at least not today. However, there was a small change here where we learned that the Ukrainian city or Ukrainian village of VRUBIVKA was actually still under Ukrainian control. Now, this brings us to this video's title. While it's unconvinced today to suggest that Russian forces used TOS-1As carrying thermobaric munitions, and as well as white phosphorus, and they bombarded the village of VRUBIVKA, and at least according to reports that we've seen, they have described it as the city ceasing to exist. Thermobaric weapons in and of themselves are not against the Geneva Convention. However, using white phosphorus and thermobaric munitions on high concentration civilian populations and against civilian objects is 100% against the Geneva Convention. In fact, it breaks Protocol 3 of the Geneva Convention, which is all it talks about. Then that's just to bring into the the humanitarian law aspect of it, the Geneva Convention or international customary humanitarian law. But really, what is this? This is an absolute horrendous atrocity, should it be true. We can take a look here. This is from Ukraine 24, who are the ones that are initially reporting this for us. There's white phosphorus for you. That bright white, that thick white. If it would like to pop up, of course. At least from what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Using it in this way is so... Think about white phosphorus in this way. It's so absolutely horrendous and gut-wrenching that it can't be described. This is probably one of the worst ways to die that I can think of. To burn alive by white phosphorus because you can't put it out. It burns at thousands of degrees. And it doesn't matter Fahrenheit or Celsius at that point. It just burns at thousands of degrees. That's all you need to know. It's terrible. And with that, we actually jump down here. And we can see that there's a couple of different things. So it's not uncommon. We know that the Wagner Group is operating in and around this area. We talked about that yesterday. And it's also not uncommon for even myself. I have patches, right? Like I bought patches. Like I have some patches. I have friends that collected patches. Everyone has some patches. Some of them are a little bit darker than others, right? Like I have one that it's in Arabic and English, and it says "Stay 100 meters back, or we will shoot," which used to be on U.S. Humvees during the Iraq War, right? Like that's some pretty dark humor to be putting on a patch, right? And just be carrying around, especially considering that's not the kind of war we were fighting at the time. Maybe a little bit similar, but it definitely wasn't 2005 Iraq. It was 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. The Russian military is more specialized units, and I do say Russian military because that's really all the Wagner Group is. It's a plausibly it's an extension of the Russian military that allows for plausible deniability. And they were used in this capacity against my own unit in Syria when they attacked our outpost during the Battle of Kasham back in 2018. So if you guys want to take a look at that, you can. But this is kind of what they're now. with those units, with these kind of units, and especially with U.S. units, like there's a pretty rigid, uniform, kind of thing going when it comes to the military, right? That's kind of one of the things that makes a standing military, especially a good one, really distinguishable from one that may be lacking, is that uniformity. And that's what we see here is the fact that, a way to kind of break up that uniformity is to take a look at, is to buy some patches. But this one, our in-house translator actually went through. This is off of a Russian Wagner PMC who is killed near Bakhmut. And his patch says in Russian, "I don't believe in anything. I'm just here for violence or rape." That being violence and rape are kind of interchangeable in this context in Russian. Let me take a look. It's pretty screwed up, to say the least. But it's okay to an extent because the Wagner are certainly taking some heavy losses. We have an update from yesterday when this stadium was hit by Ukrainian artillery. This stadium was being used. This is in Kadiivka, and this is the Stakhanov Stadium in Kadiivka. It was being used as a forward operating base and staging ground for the Wagner group, and it was hit with Ukrainian artillery yesterday. They had a lot of ammunition, a lot of troops, and a lot of equipment, fuel, you name it, stored here. And that way it's close enough to the front to, that they can operate from it. It's far enough from the front that there's some relative safety and standoff. Not enough, though, because from what we're hearing, and this is rumors circulating here, to be very clear on that, only one of the 200 Wagner PMCs that allegedly survived. Now, once again, we can't confirm that. That's just a rumor. That's even more of a rumor than what we're hearing from the village that got wiped off the face of the earth. At least there's some war correspondents that are confirming that one. This one, we just don't know. But what we do know is that the damage was very extensive. In fact, videos today of firefighters still fighting off it and keeping those fires from reigniting, essentially. They actually filmed inside of the damaged structure of the stadium. It's no longer viable to be used as a forward operating base, and that is for sure. Let's take a look.
Ураганы ударили здесь украинские. Выгорело все, до сих пор дымится. Вот. Продолжается тушение пожара. Уже уничтожаются последние очаги возгорания. Работа основная проделана. И сейчас идет ее завершение.
So obviously there's some, obviously that place is pretty destroyed. So that's not getting used anytime soon. That means they're going to have to relocate what forces survived, if any, and then relocate all their supplies and find a new place that's going to be suitable to operate that many troops out of as a forward command post. As we move further down along the front, we see a Russian MTLB was destroyed, and this one, it's another bit of footage of a Stugna P. The Stugna P is a very effective anti-armor system, and, I have a little bit of a bias, being the fact that I was an anti-missileman in the Marine Corps. I have just a little bit of a bias with, American weapon systems, that great American muscle, but, this is really effective. It's a very smart weapon system. I would have never, if you had asked me before this war what I thought of the Stugna P, I probably would have asked you, well, what is the Stugna P? Because I hadn't heard too much about it. I knew it existed, but I didn't know quite like its capabilities. It wasn't really something we really discussed. We were mostly focused on stuff that we would encounter, a lot of Soviet era equipment and a lot of stuff in Russia. So like the Russian armed forces, Chinese was another big one. And so this is, the Stygnum P. It's an anti-tank. It's an anti-tank guided missile, and it's remotely operated. It's semi-remotely operated, but it's fired from a completely separate remote control panel. It is guided by an operator, but it allows the operator to stay in cover, and it's extremely effective. One, we've seen it destroy tanks and armored vehicles and armored infantry fighting vehicles, and we see that again here today. So, I mean, this is somewhere along the Eastern Front. We don't know exactly where, but this continues to show, first of all, this MTLB is completely unsupported near Ukrainian lines. Once again, talking about that Russian doctrine like we hit on yesterday, where the Russians really just send in their armor completely unsupported and their motorized infantry companies. And this is a battle of attrition along this front line. Killing the enemy is what is going... It has to be a meat grinder. It's a war of attrition. That is what's happening. And you have to destroy and kill as many of your opponent as physically possible. And the Russians are certainly taking heavier losses than the Ukrainians, even though we've heard so far from some Ukrainian officials that the casualties along in the Donbass could be as high as 200 a day right now. So you got to imagine how high those Russian losses are, considering that the Ukrainians do have the advantage in being in dug-in defensive positions. So let's take a look at this.
Наводь. Навожу. Давай, хорошо. Дальше чуть-чуть. Yes! Тихо.
Now, for those that don't know, what is an MTLB? An MTLB is basically a very old APC developed by the Russians. It's tracked unlike the BTR, which is another APC variant they use heavily. You have the BTR, 60, 70, 80, 90. And you also have a couple different variants. The MTLB has a couple different variants, a lot less though. And the way you can remember it is mini turret, long body. It has stamped road wheels. They're unsupported. That's another very good indicator. It has a very short profile, but it has this very, very small turret sitting on top on the left-hand side. So that's kind of how you can tell what this thing is. But they're old. They are, even by Russian standards to an extent, these things are outdated. And we've seen them pull out some rather old vehicles that probably shouldn't yet ever see the light of day again, or at least should never see combat, that's for sure. So these are not adequate. They are not very good at their job, to say the least. They're very thin armored. They only have 15 to 25 millimeters worth of armor, and that's including for the slope angle of the armor. So it's not a very heavily armored vehicle to begin with. It's very light. It is maneuverable, but like I said, it has a very long, elongated frame to it. And silhouette, while it may be short, and so that kind of, especially in urban areas, makes them especially vulnerable. But that missile going through that, being a tandem warhead, meaning two charges and being two shape charges back to back, it probably went through that thing like a tin can. I mean, it went through it like a hot knife through butter. It really did. So that's most Russian vehicles, unless you're talking about their actual tanks, and even which case a lot of them have old homogeneous steel designs and not composite armor designs. So much older type of way of building tanks, and therefore a lot less effective in their armor schemes to begin with. As you jump over here, we actually have an update and a correction. So we initially reported on the situation in ANNIHILATED yesterday, and what we were saying was that that what hit ANNIHILATED and destroyed several homes. We still don't have casualties regarding this, but what destroyed several homes in this area it was a Russian missile that was shot down by Ukrainian forces. That no longer is the case. We incorrectly reported that. So we got more information regarding this, and what it appears to be is that instead of being a ballistic missile, is actually a parachute dropped bomb, and specifically are known to have been used, and from what we can tell, this appears to be an ODAB 500 PM, which is a type of thermobaric munition. It's a 420-pound bomb that Russia has developed for their Air Force. It can be dropped as it's a dumb bomb. It can be dropped like a regular dumb bomb, but we've also seen them used in Aleppo back in between April and July of 2016 when the bombing of Aleppo was occurring. They were also dropping these in their parachute configurations onto Aleppo and the surrounding cities with very, very deadly effect. These are airburst, meaning they normally don't impact the ground, and they shouldn't. These should hit, start exploding about rooftop level, and just like the TOS one, it sends out that aerosol spray, and within a couple of nanoseconds, it ignites and causes a very large, explosion, very large frame that sucks all the oxygen out of the surrounding area, which. The crater, while extensive, was extremely shallow, so that kind of lends some credibility to this. But there was actually two. The one here, which we showed yesterday, but a second one actually ended up embedding itself into the ground, as you can see there. It appears that they've taken the tail fins off, and that way they can put in this configuration. But it's embedded itself pretty deep into that. So that is currently kind of what we're seeing, and that's kind of what our conclusions we're drawing to is. The most commonly used version of this in a parachute configuration is the ODAB 500 PM, also the ODAB 500 PMV, but we could be incorrect on those. So don't quote us on the actual ordnance, but that appears to be the case here. So if you want some more information on just some of the precedents of them doing that, once again, the bombing of Aleppo between April and July of 2016, where they essentially completely flattened the entire city. As we jump down here into Donetsk, it appears that Ukrainian forces have hit the Topaz plant. Topaz is a company that produces radio equipment in the occupied city of Donetsk, and this radio equipment is essentially going directly into the hands of separatists and Russian forces because, as we all know, the logistics and the coordination for Russian forces is horrendous. We saw this in Georgia back in 2008, and we also see this today. We saw that to the northwest of Kyiv. We saw this all over the country. And what's ended up happening is because of this, they can't coordinate getting their troops resupplied. They cannot coordinate, their forces, attacking at certain times or in certain places or in certain groups or together or not together or however you want your battle plan to go. They can't do that very well because they don't have enough radios. They don't have enough equipment. We've seen them using cell phones for communication, just like we did in Georgia. The only reason they're not using pay phones is because they don't exist anymore because everyone has a cell phone. So that's kind of what's happening. And it's causing the Russian forces to take extremely heavy losses, even heavier than what they already were, simply because since they can't coordinate the attack. It's a lot better to do a regimental attack than it is a battalion level attack, and that's because you have more guys and a lot more equipment, congregated and concentrated in a single area. But we've seen instances such as during World War II. We saw it during the American Civil War. We've seen it multiple times where unsupported attacks with smaller groups of infantry, especially, or just smaller forces in general, when it was meant to be a much larger attack, really does not work out in your favor. Banzai charges in Guadalcanal, for instance, those are pretty famous for being easily repelled. I say easily repelled, but those are very famous for having been repelled because they attacked in the platoon and company size elements instead of the initial planned regimental attacks. But we can see here where Ukrainian forces have been hitting the plant. So let's take a look. And continuing on down the front lines here, more comfort. Now, we've talked a little bit about this. You always try to make your life just a little bit better no matter how bad the situation is. No matter how bad the situation is. I've cooked out of an ammo can before because we didn't have a lot of food, so we bought some off the locals, and I've cooked off of an ammo can, and I used the lid as a... I covered the lid in aluminum foil and used it like a frying pan, and I made myself some scrambled eggs. I've cooked, You know, I've cooked, you know, noodles inside of an ammo can before. Just, you know, that because, you know, you're always trying to make your life just a little bit better. We've made all sorts of stuff out of like pallets, you know, making chairs and benches and stuff out of pallets, and, you know, making tables out of stuff. I mean, whatever you can do. You get really ingenuitive when you have absolutely nothing. So whatever you can beg, borrow, and steal and make your life just a little bit better on the front lines, big improvement to morale, no matter how small. And these guys no longer have to find a bush when they need to go. They built themselves the brand new throne. So take a look at this. On the front lines, this is amazing. This is living the high life, especially if you're living in the trenches. So, yeah, good on them. A little bit of privacy, you know, better than finding a bush, better than whatever you're doing before. Hey, guys, you're living the high life. So, pretty cool to see. And that's not the first time we've seen stuff like that. We've seen them they have like a whole living room in their dugout before. So, it's really cool. Like, you get really ingenuitive. These guys get very crafty. And it's a big boost of morale. I mean, anything you can do, literally anything you can do to kind of keep your mind off of everything else going on and just make your life better. It's always going to, you know, it's always going to make you feel more confident at the very least in what you're doing, which is nice. So, however, the news regarding, you know, stuff being nice, really, illness of cholera inside of Mariupol, have decided that instead it was time for some publicity. So let's take a look.
Украинская буква И пропадает без отбора. Скоро она станет русской.
First of all, they're changing it from Ukrainian to Russian. And then, once they're done with that, they're repainting the sign of Mariupol. Keep in mind, all of this is great publicity for them. Because, oh, it's a sign of victory, Mariupol. I don't know why you're repainting the sign of a city that no longer exists, but that is rather upsetting, to say the least. But what's even more upsetting is the fact that French journalists near Mariupol documented the mass graves. And these French journalists are you know, in occupied Russian territory, but they're able to go to one of the mass they see on the ground. What they were talking to locals, they say that roughly 3,000 citizens were buried in just this one gravesite that were killed during the fighting, and most of them don't have plates, like they're name plates. They don't have crosses. They don't have name plates. They simply are marked with numbers. Once again, we know, at least from what we've documented here, at least 3 different mass grave sites around Mariupol that are being used by Russian forces and the separatist forces in order to bury what is expected to be over 20,000 people who have been killed. And apparently, if after a certain part of decomposition, according to Andrei Petroshenko, who is the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, he is saying that after a point it goes, they're not even going to bother burying it. They're just putting it in the landfill with the rest of the debris. So, that's not even going to be all of them. Now, I should probably back up here real quick to this subject. And this wouldn't be the first time human remains were found in debris. Now, a lot of people like to draw parallels to the U.S. and other stuff, that Korea, 9/11, all of that stuff. And now, there have been human remains found in the debris at the landfill site for the World Trade Centers. The difference is we didn't purposely put, I mean, if for anyone who remembers it, the amount of time they took to come through that, it took years, literal years to go through the debris of the World Trade Center, and they combed through it with as fine tooth of a comb as they could. So that's pretty accidental, not purposeful like this. Mariupol exists. There are far more bomb cities that survived and got rebuilt. This is from Kokona. It's you could say that because you're probably going to draw some parallels with that. I'm going to say to Stalingrad, Leningrad, even Berlin, I would say, or it would be some pretty big ones. So what you have to understand is that when you're drawing comparisons between wars and you're drawing comparisons to the level of destruction of war, it's really hard to put in perspective. Stalingrad was essentially completely destroyed, and the rebuilding of Stalingrad as a city really happened because of coordination between the Allied powers. Even immediately following World War II, despite the rising tensions between the Soviet Union and the West, there was still coordination, even if it wasn't great. But you have to understand that time has gone by in the last 80 years. Human beings have never been better at killing each other than we are now. And this is something I've talked about before. What you saw, the massive, aerial bombardments, the massive bombing runs, the firebombing of Tokyo, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, which were literally wiped off the face of the earth with atomic weapons have rebuilt. Yes. Can it happen? Yes. But it takes a massive plan to do it. It took an international effort to rebuild Japan. It took international efforts to rebuild Germany, and it took decades. Absolute decades to do it. And Mariupol, you have to understand how much of a bombardment Mariupol's been under. Has there been, the amount of firepower that could have been brought down onto Stalingrad throughout the entire duration of the Battle of Stalingrad was brought down on Mariupol in a matter of months. That's how much warfare is advanced. This is the 21st century now. Because that's when the vast majority of Katyusha rockets would have been built. That's when the vast majority of the Russian stockpiles were built for munitions, was during the Soviet Union times. The times of the Soviet Union. I mean, that's why every former Soviet bloc country imaginable has former Soviet equipment still, because they mass-produced a crap ton of it because that's all they poured their economy into. That's why there's so many famines in the Soviet Union. That's why that's why their economy completely collapsed, because they weren't focused on military spending anymore, and they didn't really have an economy. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, what's the Russian Federation going to do? That is exactly one of the reasons why the upgrade and the improvement of the Russian military since the rise of power for Putin. This is the exact same thing that Hitler did when he assumed control of Nazi Germany. Is he rebuilt the military and put them back into the Rhineland without any kind of problems with the Allied powers, the former Allied powers, the Triple Entente. He put them back in the Rhineland. He built massive amounts of tanks, and this brought Germany out of a depression, an economic depression that is really hard to understand when children are literally taking giant blocks of banknotes and using them as, building blocks for toys because your money is so completely worthless, it's not even worth the paper it's printed on. That is how bad the German economy was prior to World War II. And Hitler brought the German economy to being one of the most powerful in the world, and at the same time built his military to equally do that. And he took over most of Europe with it. And that's the thing. And you saw that kind of with the rise of Putin, too. I mean, the buildup in the military, the strength of the military projected through the May 9th Victory Day parades, which harkens back to his times in the Soviet Union, but this is also, while he has nostalgia, this is a form of power. Think of every authoritarian country in the world. Think of North Korea. North Korea holds massive military parades. Even though their stuff is outdated by about 50 years, they hold massive military parades. Think about China. And then you also have to think about Russia. half of Aleppo in Syria is still standing. I can dispute that one. I spent 4.5 months in the country of Syria. When you say standing, you mean the mosques. When you're going through Syria, the country is absolutely leveled except for the mosques. It is absolutely destroyed. So it's nothing. It's not like, you don't bomb a city as bad as you did Aleppo for months and months and months at a time, and immediately, like, this country's fine. Have you taken a look at Mosul anytime soon? How about Deir ez-Zor? Or how about, Manbij? Or Al-Sawar? Or Kasham? Or any of the Conoco oil plants? Or anything really just south of the Euphrates River, right? Al-Sukna. Like that, like those places, Hama. They're so destroyed. It's insane. The Battle of Raqqa, and it wasn't just the use of thermobaric weapons that was so terrible, or the extensive use of any of the really indiscriminatory, weapons of the Russian Federation. They also used actual chemical weapons. They used chlorine gas on their own people, which, yeah, guess what? That's against the Geneva Convention to use chemical weapons, especially on a civilian populace. It's horrendous enough when you do it on troops and fighters. It's really bad when you do it on civilian populations. But Aleppo is not just okay. It's not just like half standing. Okay, if I completely shattered both of your legs and you're walking on crutches, you're not okay. You're crippled beyond repair. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move over into Kherson. And here in Kherson, 2 more Russian generals were reportedly killed, according to at least the advisor to the president of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich. This is, whenever we talk about Arestovich reporting something, this is this guy. He is the advisor to the president. So he has the ear of just about everyone in the Ukrainian government and armed forces. This guy knows what's going on. And he's been rather accurate in what he has stated thus far. That was later confirmed. So he's saying that using precision-guided munitions, the Ukrainian forces ended up killing 2 Russian generals, including one has like their own officer corps that has nothing to deal with the spies, which is actually what when Vladimir Putin was a KGB member, he was a KGB officer. He was not a spy. The FSB is the immediate predecessor, or the immediate ancestor of the KGB. But anyway, so this one general was apparently he was basically in charge of overseeing the referendum within the Kherson Oblast. But on top of that, they conducted actually multiple strikes within the Kherson Oblast pretty much at the same time. And they were systematically striking multiple targets, ammunition depots, fuel depots, field headquarters facilities, but also the positions of the Syrian mercenaries. So Syrian forces, we have reported before, were brought into Russia. They're reportedly going to be going to Ukraine, but I don't even think the Russians felt that it was worth using them, because Syrian forces aren't exactly known for their fighting prowess. Even the Chechens may be better than the Syrians, and that says a lot after what we've seen on the channel. But that confirms at this point that Syrian forces are officially in Ukraine, at least mercenary forces, which really talks to you about the manpower losses Russia is really suffering right now, and the manpower shortages. They just don't have enough men. And right now it's a 1-to-1 power parity between the two countries. So you're pretty much looking at a stalemate, but that's quickly shifting in Ukraine's favor as they continue to get more supplies from the West. So that firepower, that power parity between the two countries, while on the ground, actual manpower is about equal on a 1-to-1 ratio, the amount of ordnance and equipment that can be fielded and that level of precision with that ordnance is going to really start to play a big part into breaking that stalemate. And that's what we're seeing here. So, take a look here.
Едем дальше. Старая Сбурьевка, Херсонская область. Значит, десятки убитых и раненых. Накрытие. Значит, в том числе там погибло 2 генерала. Один армейский, один ФСБшный. Причем ФСБшный тот, который отвечал за организацию референдума в Херсонской области.
Видите, фамилии известные, имена, фамилии...
Уточняю. Я хочу сказать другое, что очень вредно организовывать...
So he's just conducting an interview. He's very much known for conducting his kind of these interviews. But I got a comment regarding Syria, which actually rolls us into the international news here. I'm going to address a comment regarding the U.S. and the Kurds here when I get down into Syria. So we're gonna go through here what's going on in Europe, and then once I get down to Syria, I'll address that comment. But we're actually going to jump up here into Moscow, and that's because Moscow officially withdrew from the World Tourism Organization. This was a motion that was signed by the Prime Minister of Russia. So that is pretty much. So what this pretty much means is that the Russian Federation now is going to be open, since now that they're not part of the World Tourism Organization. What that means is the protections don't apply to people within Russia. So tourists and really any foreigners inside the country of Russia could now just pretty much be picked up off the street by Russian security forces, no problem. And this is something that that countries have feared for a little bit of, for a little while now. This is something that even the U.S. State Department, for instance, sent out multiple travel advisories: get out of Russia, do not stay, find a way out. And that was, that's kind of the situation there. But that's also, but on top of that, Russia's also building their ties even deeper with China. China and Russia have very similar ideologies when it comes to anti-Western sentiments. And they are both trying to expand their sphere of influence. China is doing it in a much different light, and we'll get to a little bit here later. But we're seeing them, apparently Russia has officially opened a bridge between China and Russia, and that actually allows them, oh wonderful, there's a thing here, an ad, but they're opening a bridge between China and Russia that allows for easier land travel. So, and as we jump back over here, back up in Germany, students were attacked here in Hamm. So an unidentified man attacked students at a vocational school in the German city of Hamm with a knife. So he injured 4 people. 2 of them are in critical condition. The individual was arrested by local police, and it is a 34-year-old male living on or near the school grounds. So that's all the information we have regarding that. And jumping down here into Turkey. Turkey's very frustrating to me, to say the least. And this is probably on top of the imminent invasion of Syria. This is probably the most frustrating thing I've read about Turkey in a long time. But Turkey warned, specifically President Erdogan of Turkey warned Greece of the events of a century ago. And I'm actually going to pull this up for you. So we're actually going to read through this. He did this. This is his official Twitter, and he actually wrote this in Greek. And it says, Turkey does not violate the rights of laws of anyone, but neither does it allow the violation of its rights and the law by anybody. He goes on to say, the importance of claiming maritime jurisdiction of 40,000 square kilometers in Megesti, located in the eastern Mediterranean, is less than 2 kilometers from the mainland of our country, while the mainland of Greece over 600 kilometers. We leave the discretion of the international community. In an attempt to instrumentalize NATO and third countries, involving them in the illegality of various military exercises on islands with a non-militarized regime, is not just an attempt that will have a disastrous end. At the same time, Greece, despite being a member of the European Union, continues to oppress the Turkish minority living in the Western Thrace, Rhodes, and Kos, and ignoring the values of the Union, human rights worldwide, and international agreements. As an ally within NATO that pays the highest price in every way, we calmly face the challenges of Greece, which for the last 2 years has not even responded to our invitation for a meeting or military delegations. But our patience and composure that are displayed and misunderstood by our counterparts. We warn once again Greece to be prudent, to stay away from dreams, rhetoric, and actions that will lead to a result which it will regret, as happened a century ago. As Turkey will not relinquish its rights to the Aegean, it will not hesitate to make us use the rights recognized by international agreements on the demilitarization of the islands. What is he talking about? What happened a century ago? Well, what he's talking about is the Greco-Turkish War of 1919 to 1922, following the immediate fall of the Ottoman Empire following World War I. What you might also know this as is the Armenian Genocide, which is not recognized by Turkey. They will not recognize the Armenian Genocide. They did break through the Greek lines in 1922, and the Greek front lines basically collapsed. They were able to re-seize several places, including Smyrna. In Smyrna, roughly 80,000 Greek and Armenian refugees were held up trying to avoid the fire set by Turkish troops. Most of them were slaughtered or forcefully deported back to Anatolia, where they died en route due to the hardships of the terrain in the region. Between 10,000 and 125,000 Greeks and Greeks and Armenians were murdered and massacred by Turkish forces and Turkish militias. He's not just talking about beating them in a war. He's reminding them of the fact that they committed genocide against them, and there was nothing they can do to stop it. And nobody in the international community has really done a whole lot to Turkey regarding it. Turkey is a very frustrating country, and that's not the only reason why, because apparently a Turkish port of Samsun also may have received stolen grain, at least according to a Black Sea monitoring group. Turkey is one of 14 countries that did receive a U.S. alert regarding the possible sale of pillaged goods by the Russian Federation. And they have been tracking the ships. New York Times is also watching all of this as well. And that brings us down finally into Syria. I'm well aware. So someone just said that the Armenian genocide is not the only genocide Turkey has conducted. Now, I would say on a genocide level, that is correct. I would say that it is correct that the only true genocide that Turkey has committed is the Armenian genocide. But as I'm about to get into, someone just said, the U.S., the same individual who just posted that, it stated that, the Kurdish forces, the Kurds are really bad off. Been following this war in Syria since 2011. Know people from there. The Kurds got the worst from the war, now abandoned by the U.S. That is unbelievably frustrating to me, and trying to find good words here to say. We didn't have a choice. I made extremely good friends with some Kurds. With a lot of Kurds. I have patches from them. I used to drink chai with them. I fought beside them. Unfortunately, most of them have been killed by now, because the losses on the Kurdish side are horrendous. The losses that the Kurds had against pro-government forces, pro-Assad forces, and the Islamic State is excruciating. I don't disregard that fact. Never will I ever disregard the fact that a Kurd died in my stead. While I was in Syria, they were the ones truly fighting the war, no matter how much we actually did. They bear the brunt of it. Never will I disregard that. Do I feel that pulling out of Syria was correct? No. I did not. I do not. But the U.S. also hasn't fully pulled out of Syria, as we've even aired here on the channel. In fact, we're still in some of the very same spots that I helped establish when I was there. It's frustrating. The war that is getting ready to happen is extremely frustrating. I do not have any good words for my Kurdish friends. Or not my Kurdish friends, but my Turkish friends, which I don't have a whole lot because I didn't have to really deal with any Turks. But the war in Syria is absolutely terrible as is, and the Kurds are really getting the worst of it. You cannot disregard that fact. Do I believe the U.S. truly abandoned the Kurds? No, not at least not out of choice. But two NATO allies fighting each other is not very good, which is exactly what would have happened. That occurred on my second deployment. We actually are the ones that ended up closing up shop at one of the LZs there, which was later captured by Russian forces and plastered all over the internet because everyone thought it was crazy, but it really wasn't, because they already had Russian forces within like a kilometer of the base, so it really didn't matter. And yeah, I mean, it was necessary. It had to happen because we can't fight Kurds or the Turks. And the Kurds are oppressed. It's not, I wouldn't say it's genocide. I would say it's probably more along the lines of ethnic cleansing. And I should probably explain the difference between the two at a very basic level. A lot of places will use the two terms interchangeably. They do not actually mean the same thing. Genocide is when you go through and you prevent people from leaving. You kill a certain group of people and prevent their escape and kill them in order to remove them from a certain area and possibly replace them with your own ethnicity or religion or you name it. Ethnic cleansing is probably more along the lines of what we may see in Syria. And ethnic cleansing is where you don't necessarily prevent the escape of a certain group of people, but you do still kill them, whoever remains, and clear them out of an area that way, which you see with the 30-kilometer security zone that Turkey has already established. And that is essentially what is expected with the additional 30-kilometer to extend that to a 60-kilometer security zone inside of Syria in this what is the imminent, as Turkey has stated, the imminent second invasion of Syria. Mainly because Turkey really does not like the Kurdish people. They are fighting them in the Dohak, which is in northern Iraq. They are fighting them in Syria. They are all labeling all of them under the PKK, which is a very small sect of the Kurdish people. The PKK is a Kurdish Marxist group. So they're essentially the communist part of the Kurds, but you also have a large contingent that are democratic, or at least socialist in some aspects, but democratic in others. And that is the vast majority of the Kurds inside of Syria, which is the YPG. It's the YPK as the whole organization, but it's broken down to two groups: the YPG, which are the males, and the YPJ, which are the females, which are the actual fighters. And that is the main two forces within the Syrian Democratic Forces, also known as the SDF. And there's also some Arab groups in there as well, but that is the main composition of those forces. and at least in Syria, and that is, it's frustrating. But getting into Syria, over here by Aleppo, between Aleppo and Manbij, actually, we're seeing a couple of different Russian convoys. Another convoy of Russian troops is spotted here in northern Syria, and additional forces and logistical equipment reportedly heading to Russian troop locations west of the city of Manbij. So, not anything crazy. The Russians are operating in this area. We already knew that, but we can take a look here. They are marked with their invasion markings, which is pretty interesting because this either means one of two things, as we've discussed here before. This is either meaning that these are forces from the battlefields on Ukraine that took really heavy losses and rotated to a different location here in the Southern Command, or it means that these units are possibly going to be pulled from Syria and sent to Ukraine in order to fight in the war there. As this is not nearly as kinetic of a conflict for the Russian troops. So let's take a look. Apparently no really good audio here, but it's just a lot of logistics videos or vehicles here. This is already kind of the usual thing. You're going to see this a lot in Syria, of just logistics convoys. I mean, that's the main thing we did was route reconnaissance and convoys. So stage, probably not. If that was going to happen, probably a couple weeks ago, when they were first talking about doing this, and we saw joint patrols with the Turks and the Russians. This would be an attempt in order to prevent, international incidents where a NATO country, i.e. Turkey, fires on a Russian position, which would then in turn start a war between NATO and possibly start a war between NATO and Russia, which is already not a good situation when you consider everything with Ukraine. So it's similar to why the U.S. forces, which were heavily embedded with the Kurdish troops, had to leave several parts of Syria, especially along the M4. So that's kind of where that probably is coming from. At this point, Turkey has already stated that the invasion is imminent. It's supposed to be happening this week. It still hasn't occurred from our understanding. There is mobilization. It really seems to be the calm before the storm. But if that was going to happen, it was going to happen some time ago. I'm sure there's some coordination. Russia is actually going to take part in the invasion, actually, because while Syria is an ally, Russia also seems to have at least some behind closed doors friendships, maybe within to a limited extent with Turkey. Turkey is really the outlier in NATO. Turkey is not very, when it comes to NATO, they really don't have the same ideologies as the rest of NATO does. And that really drives a wedge between them and other NATO countries and other European countries. And that is something that's been building, and it's really starting to show here in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know. It's possible. I'm not part of the talks. I'm not in Syria anymore. That was a couple of years ago. So but that's I could definitely see some kind of an agreement happening, that it probably needs to happen to an extent, at least some coordination to prevent, an international incident, and maintain a hotline similar to how the U.S. and Russia did when we were both operating there. But I don't know to what extent. I really don't. But I don't think that they're not going to stop the invasion. When we jump up here to Armenia, the protests continue in Yerevan. So up here, opposition rallies, and Yerevan now with protesters are heading to the residence of the president of Armenia. So we're seeing these continue, especially while the CSTO meetings are occurring. So let's take a look. Keep getting into Syria here. Using rebels using, as they say, jihadists to attack Manbij and Tel Rifat. I've kind of gone over this before, but I'll go over it again now that we have, it seems that we have a pretty decent amount of new viewers here. There's about 40 different factions fighting in Syria, or more. There is just a it's so complicated that even, it doesn't. I don't think a lot of experts don't even can completely follow it. The war in Syria is so overly complicated, it's ridiculous. Basically, it's a free-for-all on a national level. And the security situation is absolutely deplorable. There's like 70,000 Iranian fighters inside of Syria. You have pro-Turkish militias, you have Kurdish militias, you have pro-government militias, you have anti-government militias, you have Assad troops, you have Russian troops, you have Turkish troops, you have American troops, Polish troops, coalition forces, you have the Islamic State, you have Al-Qaeda, you have Hamas, you have Hezbollah, you have just about everybody who could possibly want to kill each other is in this single war between Russia and the United States. No, not really. People like to think that because the U.S. and Russia is in here. It's just basically everyone and anyone who wants to kill each other basically goes to Syria to do it because it's that bad. But you can really break it down into a couple of different larger groups. You have the Turkish forces, which are up here in the security zone, and pro-Turkish forces, which are in and around Aleppo and Manbij and Tel Rifat. All basically the general Aleppo area. There's also Russian forces because the deconfliction line between Russian and coalition forces is what's called the Merv, or the Middle Euphrates River Valley, which is right here. This goes through Deir ez-Zor province and continues on through Al-Qaim, and as it continues on into Iraq. Then you also have the coalition forces in the Kurds, which are north of that. So pro-Assad, Assad in Russia, south of the Euphrates River on the Damascus side. And then as you go over here up towards like Al-Shaddadi, you go in Al-Sawar. On that side, that is where you're seeing the coalition forces and you're seeing the Kurdish forces and democratic forces, because this area in general was already kind of semi-autonomous because this is Syrian Kurdistan. So that is kind of where you're at. That's why you're seeing coalition forces in the Battle of Raqqa, but you're not seeing them at the Battle of, say, Aleppo. So he said that Idlib is basically run by extremist gangs run by Turkey. Yeah, actually, that's pretty much what's happening. And even funnier is sometimes they actually fight each other despite being on the same side. They're all pro-Turkish. So, like I said, there are just a crap ton of different militias, and a lot of the militias are pro one side or another, on any of the major factions. But really, you can break it down to Kurds and coalition, Turkish and pro-Turkish forces, Russian and Syrian forces and pro-Syrian forces, and the extremists, which are the Islamic State, for which is the largest one. And you also have more minor groups, like I said. While 70,000 Iranian fighters sounds like a whole lot, that's really not. And they're mostly there. It's probably stuff like the IRGC from Iran, which are probably training groups like Hamas. They would be training pro-Syrian militias because Iran wants nothing more. Well, they want one thing more than to kill Americans and coalition forces, and that's to keep their power. And that's why they launched a bunch of ballistic missiles back in 2020 into the middle of nowhere on some American bases and caused absolutely no casualties. So, but reported that they killed 300 Americans. Because once again, if they actually did, Tehran would be currently occupied by the United States right now. As we jump up over here and back into the rest of the world news, we jump up over into Azerbaijan, just across the border from Armenia, and we see that massive mudflows are happening in Dashkasan. So Dashkasan is kind of in this mountainous region, hilly mountainous region of Azerbaijan, and what ended up happening is a massive mudflow washed away roads, bridges, damaged crops, and basically the entire village of Chenichi. Sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. Were affected, where the mud flow and the bridge connecting the village and the neighboring village was essentially destroyed. So they're basically all cut off. But luckily there is apparently no victims, so that's at least what's getting reported. But you can see these are just absolutely massive mud flows.
para! Sen olmazsın. Bizi de para. Sen öldürdün. Oy bana. Bu ne o? Değişik. Oy
No, thank you. I would not like to participate in that. No. But unfortunately, we're seeing similar things in other parts of the world too. We also saw that in Brazil, and we also have seen that in Southeast Asia as a result of the typhoon, and we also saw that in, of course, Durban, South Africa, where it actually ended up killing over 400 people. So I think the last time we reported it was 436 casualties as a result. So. Move over to Afghanistan. Afghanistan has a couple of different pieces of news today. So the first one is actually coming from the Red Cross, and they're saying that the price of flour in domestic market in Afghanistan has risen 47%. So the reason for that is because since the Taliban took Afghanistan, the country of Afghanistan has got basically their economy has all but collapsed. The price of bread is insane in Afghanistan, and the Taliban are quickly trying to build relations with other countries to try and reverse some of that. But Afghanistan in general has been a poor country. There were a lot of efforts for infrastructure investments during the U.S. occupation, and coalition occupation of Afghanistan, but all of those really fell through, and the U.S. mainly pulled out of Afghanistan as a whole. And the country has kind of fallen into turmoil. There's currently some rebel factions fighting in there, which does not provide any kind of more security for, it doesn't make you feel good if you're an investor knowing that your project that costs millions of dollars could be blown up during the fighting between rebels and the Taliban. So that's kind of the issue. And they're trying to build those relationships, which we're actually going to be moving on over into here when we're talking about India and the Taliban actually met again today in Kabul. So Indian media is reporting at least that the foreign ministry of India actually went to Kabul and talked with the foreign minister of the Taliban, Mutaki, but they talked with different administrations. They're getting security guarantees. This is really how you start building a relationship. We will not back pro-Pakistani groups in India. We also won't back Al Qaeda. We won't fight. We won't fight only with these groups. But India's going to pass intel on to the Taliban apparently, so that the Taliban can hunt down and destroy different insurgent groups inside of their country. So basically, that's kind of what's going on. Those security guarantees roll into other guarantees as well, and that's really how you get the ball rolling. Especially when we're talking about a group like the Taliban that fought as an insurgent group for so long, and really, I'm not going to ever paint the Taliban in necessarily a good light, but they also have a country to run, and any way you can improve a country and the lives of the people in your country, I'd say it's admirable. But I don't necessarily have good feelings about the Taliban in general. But that's my personal opinion. At least they're trying to work and actually build a country. So that's at least good there. And we can see some of those meetings here. So pretty cool. Something a little bit different when going to Afghanistan. And we actually jump on down here to Singapore. Now, I was talking a little bit earlier about Chinese expansion and trying to expand their sphere of influence. Doing so, rapidly militarizing their country. They've built the largest navy in the world now. They're working on 5th generation fighter technology. They're rapidly improving the PLA, which is their military, their ground army. And we're seeing them kind of move into a much more militaristic light. I would say similar, but not exactly the same as the Japanese did, the Japanese Empire prior to World War II. And they really undercut the pricing for just about everybody when it comes to infrastructure projects. So when you're talking about, say, Cambodia, for instance, which we actually aired yesterday. Cambodia needs an upgrade to their naval port. It seems my map's having some issues here. Cambodia is needing to upgrade their naval port. China is perfectly okay in doing that. Also, they're going to put a lot of troops there, and they're going to basically use it like their own naval port. So, once again, one thing leads to another, and just like for Afghanistan, the security guarantees as a prior insurgent group to not support others and actually to hunt down other insurgent groups, which works in their favor anyway to consolidate power, is going to lead, in their hopes, to economic changes and economic guarantees with other countries too, slowly building those relations. China's taken a different approach. They're going, since they have such a strong economy, especially an industrial economy, they can turn around and use that instead of their military and security guarantees first, and they're going to say Cambodia or Vietnam or Laos or Thailand, Burma, you name it. They're going there and they're saying, hey, you need a train system built, we can do that, and we'll do it for 500 million less than the American contractors will, and we'll do it in 3/4 of the time. And they, being such an industrialized nation and being a much closer nation, can do that. They can deliver on those guarantees. And that builds relationships with these countries, and that leads to security guarantees. And sometimes they just flat out come out with those, such as you saw with the Solomons. They're willing to put fighter jets in the Solomons, much to the dismay of Australia. This is how China is trying to expand its sphere of influence, and that is what we're actually seeing here during a summit in Singapore. China actually threatened the world over Taiwan at the summit here, and they said if anyone dares to split Taiwan from China, the Chinese army will definitely not hesitate to start a war, no matter the cost, said the defense minister Wei Fengye. So, and that's during a meeting with Lloyd Austin, because the United States has guaranteed that they will join the war on the side of Taiwan should China ever attempt to invade them. And, said the PLA, or the People's Liberation Army, would have no choice but to fight and crush any attempt of Taiwan independence, safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Taiwan is not a recognized sovereign nation. Well, that's not entirely true. They're not recognized as an independent nation in the United Nations. Taiwan, for all intents and purposes, is 100% a sovereign independent nation, but both of them see themselves as China, which is the problem. Basically, when China was taken over by the communists, the Federalists went and moved to Taiwan and set up their own government, which very recently in history actually became a democratic government. For a long time, there was still... but it was just a different dictatorship than this one. But they hate each other. Absolutely hate each other. And Taiwan is wanting for independence. China won't let them, and Taiwan's extremely close to China, obviously. So the thing is that they hate each other so much, China has said that they will send every rowboat, every fishing vessel, every naval vessel they have to invade Taiwan. They don't care what it takes. They will do it. And the U.S. take a carrier out of, say, Yokosuka Naval Base up here in Japan, and they'll sail it down here right in between Taiwan and China, because if you get so close of a carrier group, it's actually a declaration of war. And the U.S. and China, neither of them really want to fight each other, despite the rhetoric. So it's just more saber rattling on the side of Beijing. But that's currently what's going on, and here's actually a video of him talking about it. Take a look.
卫部长强调，如果有人胆敢把台湾分裂出去，中国军队必将不惜一战、不惜代价，坚决粉碎任何台独分裂图谋，坚决维护国家主权和领土完整。
So the thing about, someone just stated that, if, that, China could take Taiwan whenever they wanted. And the thing about this is that, they probably couldn't. And that's the problem. And this is probably why China hasn't yet. And everyone's seen the funny stuff when it comes to Chinese knockoffs. But the thing is that China is a knockoff. The whole thing is a knockoff. The Type 85 TAC 3 is a knockoff up armor or upgraded T90 BVM or B3 essentially. That's all it is. Their newest additions to their T series tanks, their type tanks, are basically the T14 Armada, but in their own variant. They're the 5th generation fighters that they're currently testing and or fielding right now are basically they looked at the F-35 and went, wow, we should build our own version of that, and basically made their own version of the F-35. Their weaponry, I mean, the Chinese AK-47. Well, who developed the AK-47? Russia. Their entire military is basically a Russian copycat. It's just the fact that they are so huge and they have such a large population that they have, and such a huge economy, that they just have a lot more than Russia does of it. But everything's a copycat of somebody else. They don't maintain a naval force because they have copied the way that essentially Russia did things, and they're the last bastion of communism now. They essentially have the same inherent difficulties that Russia has. Because they follow the similar doctrines and military style, and basically everything in China is a knockoff of Russia and the Russian style of communism to an extent, until they started kind of changing it into semi-communist capitalist owned kind of weird society, weird hybrid. But militarily it's very similar still. And that means that the same inherent failures regarding logistics show themselves. China has the largest navy in the world. However, the United States still maintains the largest amphibious naval force in the world. So China doesn't have the ability to land a large naval amphibious force, and Taiwan being an island, that's a problem. Can they send 1 million men? Well, yeah, that's true, but 1 million men also got stopped at the 38th parallel. Because that's literally the only reason that North Korea survives, is because of the Chinese intervention. And it doesn't matter how many troops you send, because if I can sink all of your ships here in the Taiwan Strait before the men even arrive, you're screwed. All it takes is a crap ton of naval sea mines here in the Taiwan Strait and some anti-ship missiles, and half of your landing force is gone. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many men you throw at it. They have to get to the shore in order to take over Taiwan. And if they can't get to the shore in any meaningful, coordinated effort, and they can't be supplied, because keep in mind, you're sending troops, and troops need a lot of things. They need fuel for their vehicles. They need ammunition to actually shoot at the enemy, and they need food to survive. Not offensive that happened over and Buchain, where the Islamic State lost ground. It was taken by basically the Azawads, which are the Gadia and the MSA militias. And they were then pushed back by the Islamic State, because the Islamic State has the forces and the capacity to do this here in Africa. Well, they're pretty upset about that. So they have regrouped here in Monaco, and they're planning on re-engaging them and fighting for the offensive here. And you take a look. They are not happy about it. These militias are pouring a massive number of troops and equipment into this. It's turning it into very much a large-scale three-way war, because the Azawads want to split Mali in two. They actually want to declare independence in northern Mali, much like North and South Sudan. So that's kind of the same situation here. You have a military junta that is in Bamako, down here in the capital. And then you have the Azawads in the north, and then you just have the Islamic State, who is pretty much everywhere. But they are mainly concentrated here in this kind of border region. As we jump over here into Burkina Faso, we have a couple of things. First of all, 11 gendarmes were killed in Seno, or near Seno. Basically, it's called the gendarmerie, and they're basically like a hybrid between a police force and like a security military force. They're it's pretty cool. It's a French actually idea here, but then attack yesterday, on the evening of yesterday, near Santanega district, which is on the border with Niger. Militants actually attacked and seized a gendarmerie building. While the security forces did resist and held out until reinforcements, the skirmish, while it did kill several of them, they ended up taking some pretty severe casualties there. And that is the official press release regarding this. Now, being previous French colonies, a lot of these press reports and everything are in French. And up here in the north, while this is believed to be an attack by the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wa Muslimin, which is basically a associated group to Al-Qaeda. At least 3 people were killed and 10 more, including 3 troops, were actually injured by militants when they attempted to capture a gold mine located in the northern part of Burkina Faso. And so basically they exchanged guards with the militants, and they awaited the arrival for a quick reaction force, or a QRF. And the attackers ended up fleeing, but the Burkina Faso Air Force actually tracked them down and launched a series of strikes on them. So security forces ended up seizing weapons and transports from these attackers. But once again, this is expected to be an Al-Qaeda related group. As you can see here, some of those weapons and equipment that they ended up seizing. And that is actually it for Africa. And so we actually jump over here into the Americas, where we have a couple of different topics. A little bit different today. So the U.S. inflation rate actually reached 8.6%. This is the highest inflation rate in 40 years. 8.6% is currently causing a lot of impacts on American consumers. You're seeing pretty skyrocketing rates when it comes to, your food at the store, your gas prices. I work in transportation now, that I'm out of the military, and I deal with moving trucks from one place to another. So especially when it comes to gas prices, the price of gas and diesel. Right now the fuel surcharge is sitting at 54 cents a mile. When I started, it was at 29 cents a mile. To give you an idea, same thing. It was 32 cents a mile that you would be paid for diesel. Now it's up to 69 cents a mile. So a very, very dramatic increase over the last year as inflation rates continue to climb. And the last time inflation was this high was actually when it was 8.3% in 1981. That's not the only thing, much to my delight, because I actually enjoy sriracha on some things, while I'm not a big fan of hot sauce. Sriracha is going to be in short supply this summer because environmental issues, as well as the global logistics network that has been completely screwed up over the last few years, between the pandemic and then, of course, the war in Ukraine. On top of that, with environmental issues, is really hurting chili peppers supplies. And so this hot sauce company, Sriracha, is pretty famous. It's a really widely used condiment here in the United States. Has stated that there will be a shortage that are not able to maintain normal levels of production. Highly recommend Sriracha. It's pretty good. I'm a fan of Sriracha. I do enjoy it. While I'm not a big fan of hot sauce, I'm not a big fan of super spicy stuff to begin with. But I like I at least like flavor. You know what I mean? And that actually gets us to the good stuff in the news, because there's actually a couple things today. So the first thing we have is here in Jerusalem. So we have a new radar actually being developed in Jerusalem. So the Israeli company Kamerotech has actually developed a specialized Xaver 1000, which is a radar. And it's designed for reconnaissance units, rescuers, and the police. And it's essentially be able to see objects behind walls. Just think X-ray vision, but for you. So this is what it looks like. It looks much like a breaching charge, but it's actually it's a radar. It allows you to see through the wall. How well it works, I don't know. I'm sure that's something that people won't disclose a whole lot on, but it's really cool that the technology is getting developed. It really shows you, what I mean when I say like this kind of stuff develops in the military and security services and that kind of stuff. Really presses the development of a lot of other things. GPS was designed for the military to be able to coordinate where troop positions are and conduct, operations in areas where they would normally wouldn't. Obviously that was a thing. Aircraft development, rapidly, accelerated after the Wright brothers flew their first flight. Immediately, the U.S. military went, how can we use this? We're pushing things off boats and all sorts of stuff. And that led, quickly into World War I, not too much later, and you saw a completely different aircraft than what the Wright brothers had. And then World War II, once again, just a couple decades later, and then you immediately roll into the jet age, which we're still in. It's pretty crazy how rapidly that kind of stuff develops. So this, while it's being developed for security purposes, that technology is going to be used for something else in the future. Don't know what it is, but I'm sure that it's pretty cool. I'm sure there'll become an application for it in the civilian world. And a couple of developments in Japan. So the first one is actually pretty cool. I really like dinosaurs, for those that didn't know. I am essentially a child in an adult body. That is essentially how my mentality goes. So I see dinosaurs and I just get excited with pure joy. So a new dinosaur species was found near Nakagawa, Japan. So millions of years ago, it's apparently a bipedal dinosaur with knives for fingers, essentially. And it stalked the shores of Japan and the Asian continent. But they use their massive claws for slashing vegetation, and it seems they're known as therizinosaurs. So bipedal primarily are herbivores, three-toed dinosaurs, lived in the Cretaceous period, 145 million to 166 million years ago. So they found some pieces regarding this. Part of it was some of its vertebrae, some of it was part of its leg, essentially, or its forefoot, partial wrist and forefoot. So it's pretty cool. They have an artist rendition of this, what it looks like. Very colorful. Something that's really changed over, especially recent decades, as we've been able to research dinosaurs a lot more in depth as technology has improved, is the fact that being so related to birds, there's a very big misconception. These very lizard-like, dinosaurs that you saw in like Jurassic Park. They were much like birds. Dinosaurs are believed to have been very colorful, very, very vibrant and colorful. Because birds are actually their closest relatives. Birds are direct descendants of dinosaurs. The chicken is actually the closest relative to Tyrannosaurus Rex alive with us today. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. But, yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool looking dinosaur. I love the color scheme that this artist put together for it. And that's part of the forefoot. We can take a look at this. So this is the life-size reconstruction. These are the parts of the animal that they have found thus far. So very, very much just some minor fragments, but that stuff can tell you a lot about how something, lived millions of years ago. And so it's really cool to find out. I'm sure as they find more and as they kind of do some more research and analyze this stuff, and hopefully find more complete fossils going forward, they'll probably get a much better picture painted. Anyone that kind of follows paleontology and how things have developed over, the last about century and a half-ish, especially since the study of dinosaurs really began in earnest, could tell you there's been some very major shifts in the ideology behind how dinosaurs, lived and how they lived, how they looked, how they stood, how everything. The posture alone has changed completely. So it's pretty cool to see. As you jump over here into Tokyo, the University of Tokyo made a massive advancement in prosthetics. This is some sci-fi level crazy stuff here. So Japanese scientists basically have covered a robotic finger with self-healing skin made of living human cells. So when the finger is bent, the skin stretches and it does not deform. So it's just like if you were to manipulate your own hand, right? And then the skin was cut and then covered with a collagen gel basically coagulates the blood and everything, and the wound healed itself essentially. The scientists now plan to add nails, sweat glands, hair follicles, and sensory neurons to provide touch to it. For all intents and purposes, for people who have lost their hand and could need other prosthetics, this is the closest thing that you'll be able to get without physically growing something back. You'll be able to feel again. You'll be able to manipulate things again. And people that may have been born with defects like that will be able to do it for the first time in their lives. This is a huge advancement in science. This is a huge advancement in medicine. So it cannot be underestimated how important that is. That kind of technology, even this early on, is way ahead of anything else. And this technology, you know, going forward with further development could, like I said, completely change how, you know, what it's like. I mean, and just think, not too long ago, we just talked about people like using human cells to 3D print an ear. Now that opens up the with human cells. 3D printed an ear with human cells and transplanted it onto a person successfully. Can you imagine doing that and pairing it with this? Insane. Absolutely insane. I mean, the technological advancements in medicine are being in leaps and bounds right now. I mean, this is stuff that people 50 years ago would have thought, oh, you know, where'd you see that on TV? Like, there's no way. You know, people saw that, you know, in Star Wars in the 70s where he has this really, you know, realistic looking hand, right? Well, it's a possibility now. And there's actually some scientific debate to say that the first person that will never die has actually already been born because of stuff exactly like this. I've talked about that before. It's a kind of a philosophical, you know, scientific debate on whether that's the possibility, but the rapid advancement of medicine and of developments like this worldwide really puts that into perspective for you. First, one of my mods just posted a comment about, in so about 10 years, you can become Darth Vader. Well, anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering, essentially. So I guess if you want to go down that path, you can. But last I knew, Darth Vader's suit and everything else was rather terrible. So I would just go with the Luke Skywalker version of this stuff. It looks a lot cooler, I think. But anyway, that's actually all the news today. Really cool advancements. We got 3 really nice things of news today. You know, the uplifting stuff and not the depressing, you know, it's war and everyone's dying and there's famine and floods and all that. And a lot of interesting comments. Obviously, I had a little bit of a personal opinion kind of philosophy end of that, but I apologize if that's not really what you're here for. But a lot of this stuff is very emotional. A lot of this stuff is very emotionally charging. The stuff that you're hearing from both sides, it's meant to have a narrative to it. Everything has a narrative when it comes especially to wars like between Russia and Ukraine. Both sides are releasing casualty numbers. We don't really talk about those here in large. And Russia is withholding casualty numbers. Everything is meant to build to a narrative. Everything is meant to tug at your heartstrings. Everything is meant to make you feel an emotional way about the subject because that garners support for either side. And especially having lived through some of this stuff, you know, going through, especially with Syria, it's kind of an emotion, you know, it's kind of an emotional thing, especially knowing kind of what happened there, and having friends be involved and kind of going through it myself. So I apologize once again if that's not what you're here for, but that's just the fact of reality. I want to be able to provide some context and provide some insight into what's going on, with, you know, within reason. So. But other than that, that is all of the news today. Obviously, there's a lot of bad stuff going on throughout the world. I really hope that you guys, you know, can continue being an awesome community, and everything going on. I really appreciate you guys, you know, going and putting, you know, so much time and energy into this. I apologize once again for the internet tonight. I know it hasn't been the greatest over the last couple days. I'm not quite sure what the issue is, and hopefully it will get fixed shortly. But hopefully tomorrow will just kind of be better on that aspect. But once again, I apologize to some of the stuff today, but especially with the internet. But hey, luckily we can help with all the stuff going on in the world, though. And that is the great thing about this channel. That's our passion. That's why we're doing this. Is we want to be able to report the news and at least it clearly stated when we have a bias. We try to stay apolitical and stay unbiased in this, but we are human beings, so that it can be difficult. But we are looking to help people, and we're never going to be doing super chats on this thing. I hate those with a burning passion. I know a lot of streamers do, and I understand that it's also their jobs and they have to support themselves, but I have a full-time job, and I'm here to help people. So I hope that you will accompany us in that goal in helping people worldwide. Check out the description below and check out all those different fundraisers. There are tons of them, and don't just focus on Ukraine. There are millions of people in other parts of the world. 90% of the Tigray region of Ethiopia, which is here in the north, requires humanitarian aid to survive. You're talking about massive amounts of malnourishment. Children in the Horn of Africa, so here in Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, all of this kind of Horn of Africa region, the most affected demographic are children under the age of 5. So because they can't fend for themselves. And of course, there's a lot of humanitarian disasters. You're talking about Durban, South Africa. You're talking about Brazil, Mexico. Obviously, what's going on in Iraq. What happened with Super Typhoon Rai in Southeast Asia. People are still recovering from all of that, and people are there's still a lot of pain and suffering going on in those places, and we want to be able to help. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, please give us a like and subscribe, especially if you enjoy the content. Let your friends know about us. Because the more people that come here, the more people that can enjoy the way that we kind of do things here, but also, even more importantly, the more good we can do throughout the world. So, once again, I really appreciate the support you guys have already given us. I really can't thank you enough. I mean, it's a really big milestone for a small channel, and I hope it continues to grow. You guys make this an awesome community. But if you learn of any other sources that we could use, or if you know of any other organizations for fundraising we could use and add to this, please let us know on our Discord. The link is also in the description. Also, if you just want to join for the fun of it, a lot of stuff gets posted. We have different sections for all over the world. So, and you can come in there, you can ask me questions, pick my brain a little bit, and see kind of where my opinions lie if you really wish to. I dare you. But that's kind of where we're headed. And we want to just continue doing good. So I really appreciate everything, guys. I hope you, your family, and your friends remain safe. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your Friday night and your Saturday. And we will see you again tomorrow with another daily review of the last 24 hours, the major headlines of global news. So once again, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul from the New News. And I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow. Have a great night. Bye.